Can you see the slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I have shared some material like some link of useful where the useful materials are available related to this experiment. Of course, online laboratory class, no physical experiment or actual experiment. It's virtual, and also the instruction sheet. Let me, yeah, take the instruction sheet in front of me. The name of the experiment is study of DC servomotor characteristics. So there are few keywords: study, DC, servo, motor, and characteristics. So all keywords are carrying some meaning. So first of all, let me explain what is servo. What is servo system? That you should know. Why the name servo? Why the keyword servo or the as has been added as prefix to the word motor? So point of discussion will be like this: what is servo system and significant aspects of DC servo motor, necessity of determining the characteristics of DC servo motor, experimental setup, description of it, what the procedure as detailed in the instruction sheet, and samples. I will show some sample test data and how to use that data, and some discussion, finally conclusion. So first of all, what is servo system? The word servo came from the emerged from the word servant. As in case of a master and servant relationship, what master commands, the servant follows. So here, the servo system is a closed loop system. Servo system is a closed loop system or feedback control system where the servo system, the control system of a servo system or controller of a servo system acts in such a manner that the system output tracks the command or reference input. I think somebody is waiting.
Sir, you are not audible, sir.
Can you see the slide?
Yes, sir.
So servo system is a feedback control system in which the control variable is a mechanical position or its time derivative. That means the motion. Motion consists of position, velocity, acceleration. So we are able to control the motion as per the command from the user. So this is a typical example of a servo system where a motor is being used as an actuator. Now this is the very generic block diagram of a servo system. And servo system, this is a good application of a servo motor or servo system in position control. So you will find lot of application areas of servo system. For example, the position control or tracking control of telescope, large telescope, radar, robotics. In industrial robots, what happens? The task, depending upon the task, the path of each and every joint is planned, and then the control system of the robot tracks the desired path of every joint. So it's a good example of servo system. Now, as these motors are being used for the servo control, so they are known as servo motor. Now, servo motors are, this is the inner basic block diagram. So here you will find at the output of this control element or controller, this control signal will be amplified by some amplifier, and it will be fed to the motor, servo motor, to act on the plant or process. And the amplifier is known as servo amplifier. We will see it. So basic block diagram of a servo system remains the same. It's closed loop. Now DC servo motor, servo motors are of two types depending upon the power supply: DC servo motors and AC servo motors. Nowadays, AC servo motors are not in use. Most of the servo motors that are in use are DC. And DC servo motors are of two types: armature controlled. DC servo motors are used in two ways. One is armature control mode, and another one is in field control mode. But application of field control of DC servo motor is quite rare. So most of the time, DC servo motors are controlled in armature control mode. And once again, armature control mode DC servo motors, the servo motors which are operated in armature control mode are of again two types. One is having permanent magnet type field. Another one is having field coils. Normally, when the motors are of small, and when the design is such that design expectation or design objective is such that the motor should be lightweight, then permanent magnet field is preferred compared to the wound field, because additional copper weight will be there. But for large motors, you will not get that much powerful permanent magnet. Then you have to have field coil. So the basic structure, inherent structure of DC servo motor is same as ordinary or commercial DC motors. Okay, this field coil is just a schematic. This shows the field MMF. It may be the field MMF may be generated by a coil or electromagnetic coil, or it may be due to the permanent magnet. Now, what is the significant fact? What are the significant factors in DC servo motor compared to the ordinary or commercial DC motor? Or what is the difference between a DC servo motor and a general purpose DC motor? There are two differences. Number one is, and very important differences, important factors during the design. The design factors, the difference in design factor. Principle of operation is same. Look wise they are same, but not exactly same, but similar. I made my statement. They are similar but not same look wise, because there is a difference in geometry. I will explain it. The factor is in design. The factor in the difference lies in the design factors. What is that? The dynamic response should be fast. The requirement from a DC servo motor is that it should be fast enough to track the motion command. It's an electromechanical system, so it should be capable of tracking the command or reference quite fast. Otherwise, there will be a delay in the tracking performance. Okay, suppose you have given a command to a radar to track some object, flying object. Some asteroid is moving and very fast, and your very big telescope, astronomical telescope, you have deployed to track its trajectory. But your command and the response, your command, the delay between the command and response is such that by the time you have tracked, you have fitted the telescope to your desired position, the asteroid has gone. So this is fail. And in robotics also, if you want to do some useful purpose, and if there is a delay between command and the tracking performance, what will happen? The robot will be very sluggish, and the output or throughput of the robotic system will be very slow and not accurate. So it should be fast. And number two, there should be least nonlinearity. So nonlinearity results into, you might have learned it, the nonlinearity in a system results into steady state error. So if I keep the nonlinearity to a small value, the accuracy of the servo motor will be large. And in the servo system, it is expected that its tracking performance should be good. That means it should be fast enough so that there is no delay or minimum delay, and the tracking error, that means the steady state error, should be small so that the performance is good. For example, in a robotic surgery, if the surgeon want to perform a laparoscopic surgery using a surgical robot, and if the steady state error is large, then what will happen? Suppose he wants to perform the surgery in eye or in retina or in some internal organ of a human, and because of the error, it may cut a smaller amount or larger amount than the desired cutting, and the tissue removal will not be appropriate. So there may be failure in surgery. So this is an example of the extreme cases where steady state error may result into catastrophic output. So how it can be achieved? By design. The answer is by design. How? If I want to make the system fast, I should keep the inertia, as the system is a moving system. So if I want to make the system fast, the inertia should be kept low. In a DC motor, the inertia of the rotor is important for us to make it faster. So I must keep the inertia during the design. I must keep the inertia of the motor to a low value. And from your basic knowledge, basic understanding of engineering design or engineering mechanics, rather, you know that the diameter plays a big role in the inertia. So from that principle, if I want to keep the inertia of a DC servo motor to a small amount, then I must reduce the diameter of the rotor or armature during the design. Okay. With this concept, if I go further, then we again know that for a rotating machine, the mechanical output is proportional to the square of diameter. Now, you have already reduced the diameter during the design, so you have already reduced, and this has led to the reduction in the mechanical output. That is not desirable. Now, in order to compensate the desired compensate the reduction of the desired output, what we can do, we know that desired output is further proportional to the length of the rotating part. So I have an option that if I reduce the diameter of the armature, I can increase the length of the armature so that the torque or power output remains the same. And actually that is done. If you compare the DC servo motor with a DC motor of same power rating, you will find that A DC servo motor is slimmer in diameter, is slim but longer. Okay, by visual inspection between a DC servo motor and a DC motor of same power rating. The DC motor will be will have a smaller diameter because we want to keep the inertia less, whereas the DC servo motor will be longer because we want to keep the output same without sacrificing the output that has been reduced due to the reduction in diameter. This is one aspect. Another aspect is I want to keep the nonlinearity to a small value. So in order to keep the nonlinearity to a small value, we must proceed for the design with good electrical design and good mechanical design. Good electrical design consists of design of magnetic circuit and design of electric circuit. Electric circuit doesn't have any effect on the nonlinearity for prima facie at the DC motor design. Only magnetic circuit has a very significant role. If you keep the designed or maximum flux density very high value, what will happen? It may penetrate the operating due to the variation in voltage. The magnetic the magnetic circuit may lead to saturation. So that we cannot allow. So magnetic the cross section of the magnetic material should be such that the system or the DC servo motor during its operation should not go into saturation. That is one aspect. Another thing, we must choose the magnetic material, a good magnetic material, so that the hysteresis effect is less. Hysteresis also result into non-linearity. Okay. Another thing is this is electrical design, and from the mechanical point of view, you must select the machine components. You must select the machine or mechanical components such that it has less non-linearity. The mechanical components may be gear, because you need gearbox to reduce the speed of the output shaft. So gearbox should be of good quality, so that the backlash dead zone should be small. Backlash should be small, and the bearing should having less friction, because friction plays a big role in non-linearity. So these factors, if you can address properly, you can design a good DC servo motor. So I hope it is clear to you. Up to now, up to this, how many people have any doubt? Do you have any doubt up to this? So can I proceed?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let us explain an experimental setup. So this is the experimental setup. We got it from the, we purchased it from the company known as Feedback System UK. Feedback System UK. They manufacture laboratory scale experimental setup. Okay. So there are many things that are not needed for this particular experiment. So I have marked the needed part by red text. So I'll start from here. This is the DC servo motor. The servo motor is lying inside this box, this just below this cover. Okay, the schematic diagram is given over here. It shows that although it's a bit hazy, but it is quite detectable that the motor is being operated as armature control mode. Okay, as a permanent magnet type. The DC motor shaft, output shaft, is having a disc, aluminum disc, tightly coupled on it. So a round aluminum disc is mounted on the output shaft of the DC motor, and the other end of the shaft is coupled by flexible shaft coupling with the tachogenerator shaft. Tachogenerator is used to measure the speed of the motor. And there is another thing here, it's called permanent magnet brake. This member is movable, and this is a permanent, very powerful permanent magnet. There is a slot between these two halves, and or air gap between these two halves. What happens in the between this air inside the air gap, the field or flux density is very high, and when I allow the disc, when I move the this portion of this magnet in this direction and allow the metallic disc, aluminum disc, to cut the flux, what happens? It creates eddy current to be induced inside the disc. Okay, and the flow of current will be in such a direction that it will oppose the cause. That means cause is the rotation of the disk. Cause is the rotation of this. So the torque generated by the eddy current will be applied as a load. Will be applied as a load because load retards the motion. Okay? Try to retard the motion. So that's why it's called eddy permanent magnet or eddy current brake. Eddy current brake. It's called permanent magnet or eddy current brake. It operates in the principle of eddy current. That's why it's called eddy current brake. It's using permanent magnet, so that it's also called permanent magnet brake. Okay, the shaft coupling is a flexible type shaft coupling because it's very difficult to align two rotating shafts with 100% accuracy. If there is some inaccuracy in the mechanical alignment, what happens? There will be vibration and unbalanced axial torque, and that may lead to wear and tear of the bearings and other undesired effect. We cannot tolerate that because we are interested to couple a tacho generator, which is a sensor and a costly equipment. We are going to connect this costly equipment with the shaft of the DC motor. That's why we need a flexible shaft coupling. Although it looks quite rigid, but inside the this metallic part there are rubber bushings, and that actually absorbs the vibration that may generate due to the slight misalignment. Okay. The entire base is magnetic base. This sheet is a magnetic sheet, and all these components or modules are coupled to this magnetic base. Okay. They have magnets below this surface. Anyway, they are tightly coupled to this base, so no movement. Once you couple, you arrange everything, there is no movement, slipping. Now the DC servo motor is getting power supply from an amplifier called servo amplifier or driver. It's also called driver in industry. So what happens? We want to vary the armature voltage depending upon the control command, control input. So, okay, the control input is a control signal. The signal has no power to drive a motor. That has to be amplified. The control signal is coming over here, and that is amplified by the servo amplifier, amplified in terms of current, amplified in terms of voltage, so that there is power amplification. So that is fed to the armature of the DC servo motor. They are connected internally from using wire, and the power that the amplifier needs to supply over here is getting from a regulated power supply, DC power supply. And we will need there is one ammeter over here that helps us to measure the current. And as we will perform this experiment in open loop, we will use a potentiometer, a rotary type potentiometer, to give the reference command. And below you can see red, black, and blue. These three types of connectors or wires. Red stands for plus 15 volt, black stands for 0 volt or ground, and blue stands for minus 15 volt. Yeah, we will use all these three power supplies during the experimental work. Now the connection diagram is given in your instruction sheet. There is a small mistake here. The motor one end of the motor is connected to the ground, and another one is connected over here, not here, because this is connected to ground, so no voltage can enter into the applied. No voltage can be applied across the armature with this connection. There is a jumper, and it is connected over here, the common emitter. Yeah, and see the supply to the armature is given at this point between ground and this point, and this is called EI. EI is the armature voltage supply, and here we may use one potentiometer or two potentiometers together. So when we use one potentiometer, there is no need for summing amplifier. We can directly connect the output of the potentiometer at this point. What is the role of this potentiometer? You see, the voltage is 0 to 15 volt, so we can generate a variable DC voltage from 0 volt to 15 volt using this potentiometer. So sometime during the experiment we need two voltages. We need to apply two voltages together, or after application of one voltage we want to apply another voltage. Then we need the summing amplifier. This will sum up this voltage as well as this voltage. Okay, and sorry. And this tachometer is connected to the shaft, schematically shown, and this is the metallic aluminium disc and the magnet. Now some data is given during the experimentation. We will need this data. The manufacturer has supplied the data. One data is tacho generator constant. What you will do, look at this diagram. We can measure the voltage output at this point, generator. And if you know the voltage output, and from this relation you can calculate the RPM. So it's called tacho generator constant. It's called tacho generator constant. Tacho generator constant. The tacho generator constant is 2.7 volt per 1000 RPM. So if it is 0.5 volt, from here you can calculate what is the RPM. Okay. Another thing, another table is given, not shown in terms as it's a table, but it's a table indeed. For any brake torque characteristics is given for a speed of 1000 RPM. So this data is for 1000 RPM. At brake position, the brake means the look. I will show that this brake can be changed from position 10 to position 0. When position 10, the entire disc is inside the air gap of the magnet. When position 0, when the brake is set to position 0, then it will not cut any flux. It's totally outside the magnet. So the data is given over here. When the brake position is 2, the torque at 1000 RPM is 5 millinewton meter. At position 3, 23. Position 4, 41 millinewton meter, and so on. At position 10, 160 millinewton meter. The idea is that at equilibrium, the brake torque and the load and the motor torque, they are same. So from the brake torque characteristic, you can get the motor torque characteristic. Anyway, now we will show you a demonstration video. Let me explain. So here the potentiometer that will be used to generate the variable voltage, variable DC voltage. This is summing amplifier. There are a few inputs, and this is the DC motor. This is servo motor. This metallic disc, the permanent magnet, is movable. See, net position 10, fully inside. Okay, the positions are calibrated over here. This is flexible shaft coupling. Inside the sockets, there are rubber bushing. The voltage will be measured over here. The motor is here. It's a bit dark, that's why it's not quite clearly visible. I didn't have any torch at that time. This is the servo amplifier. EI is given over here, armature voltage. Sorry. This is the power supply. This ammeter is not used nowadays. We do not use this ammeter nowadays. We use another multimeter. We have bypassed it and connected the multimeter in parallel, in series with this meter, and we have bypassed it. Anyway, So during this demonstration, the first run, what we have done, I'm reading it. Connect the servo motor and servo amplifier to an for armature control mode. Set the brake position at 10. Switch on the power supply. Rotate the attenuator pods slowly till the input voltage to the servo amplifier is or EI is 7 volt. So what I will do, I will rotate this amplifier, attenuator or potentiometer such that the output over here is 7 volt. But actually we are nowadays performing for 1 volt and 2 volt, not 7 volt. It's the old instruction sheet. So we'll set first of all at 1 volt, then keep the brake position 10 at first, and then gradually we will change the brake position from 10 to 8, then 6, then 4, 2 and 0. Okay, and note down the variation in speed and the variation in current, because at the beginning for this much input voltage we are performing this experiment in open loop. For this much input voltage or armature voltage of 1 volt, say we have applied maximum torque when load torque when the position was brake position was 10. Okay, then the current armature current will be maximum. The maximum limit of armature current is given as 1.7 ampere. So we must keep the armature current below this limit. Normally the current reaches 1.6 or 1.58 like that ampere. And when we will reduce the load, what will happen? The motor speed will go up and the armature current will also get reduced. So I can show you some experimental data that I had in the repository of our laboratory archive. This is the experiment actually. So let me show this video of the experiment. This is during the experiment for brake position 5. I'll show just one run. We have seen the voltage generated at the tacho generator. The armature, this is the armature current. We have given the input. Now this experiment has started. This is the armature current. This is the VG, that means the tacho generator output. So we were changing the potentiometer. Now this is set. This is the armature. This is the VG. This is armature current. No. Something is missed. Something is missing. So this is. This is for various conditions. When at this point, see, some loading is there. Current is this much. The loading has been reduced. The current has gone down. Speed has increased. Tacho voltage also increased. Anyway, the pattern is this. Say brake position 10, input voltage is 1 volt, armature current 1.55, tacho voltage is 1.1. Now you have withdrawn, or you have moved the brake position to 8. That means some load is withdrawn. So armature current has gone down and the tacho voltage has increased. Okay. Now a lower brake setting, that means lesser load, armature current has gone down further and the tacho voltage has increased further. Finally, at position 2, see this armature current has gone down further and the tacho voltage has increased. Now same thing will be repeated for voltage, input voltage to 2 volt. So we are keeping the armature voltage constant. First at the first case 1 volt and second case 2 volt. So again, starting from brake position 10, see now the armature current was 2.58. I think the motor has been changed. So now the motor current has been increased, and the VG is 2.13. The instruction sheet it is given 1.7 is next. So I think this was the limit for the older motor. Now they have changed the motor. The more current can flow. Anyway, so maximum current to the pattern is like that. At the maximum load, the armature current is highest, and then it will gradually go down. Okay, as I am increasing the armature voltage, so the current has also increased. Because and the speed also increased. Earlier this much RPM, almost not exactly double, but very near to that double. So if I plot this data, see the ideal characteristics is like this, linear. Speed and torque characteristic for ideal system should be linear, and for our experimental, I have taken this photo from our repository. See, this is for 2 volt and this is for 1 volt. The pattern is linear, almost linear and parallel, almost parallel. This is not the ideal system. That's why there is a change in slope. But in ideal system, there should not be any change in slope. They should have the same slope. And because of these linear characteristics, I can use this table. For 1000 RPM, I am calculating the torque for this position, this position. So if I know the position and if I know the speed, I can calculate the torque from just by interpolation and extrapolation, or from unitary method. As this is a linear, as this should follow a linear characteristic. Okay. Up to this, do you have any doubt?
No, sir.
So we have finished one part, that is determining the speed torque characteristics. Now we will find out is there any non-linearity present in the system. The very common non-linearity, as I said, lies in the electrical characteristics. That is the hysteresis. We will try to find out is there any hysteresis. If we perform the experiment for, I think it is beyond the scope, for all type of non-linearity, we may determine the amount of non-linearity due to backlash in the gearbox, or due to friction. Everything can be determined, but for simplicity, we have restricted the discussion up to hysteresis only. So we would like to check for any hysteresis present. Earlier, I can remember the motor for which the instruction sheet was prepared, it didn't have any non-linearity. It was such a nice motor. But this motor may have non-linearity. You can. So demonstration video. What we'll do before demonstration, let me read it. Now for this determination of nonlinearity, we will set a break position 3. Now we will increase the input voltage EI slowly from 0 to highest value without exceeding the maximum allowable current in some step of 1.1 ampere, and check for each step we will check the speed. After it reached the maximum allowable current, we will reduce the input voltage till 0. So first we will increase the armature voltage. We will note down the current, armature current, and the speed or the tachogenerator voltage. Tachogenerator voltage is corresponding to this. It corresponds to the speed with some factor. We can multiply it with the tacho constant. We will get the speed directly in RPM. So let me perform. Let me show you the video. I have kept this break position fixed. Perform that position 10. Minimum voltage. Oh, I think this sequence of the video got disturbed. This is actually run 1, the earlier experiment. So this is actually the previous one. I could not match it. Okay, this video is for run 1, that for determination of the characteristics. I'm very sorry. For change in position, see the current is going down, but the armature voltage has been kept to 1 volt. This is for the previous experiment. They look alike, that is the problem. Anyway, so the demonstration should be this one, I think. Yeah, this one. The break position has been kept at 5. This is actually for hysteresis determination. We kept the break position at 5, and we will change the potentiometer so that the armature voltage will gradually increase. This is for the armature voltage. So some armature voltage, minimum armature voltage, you start the rotation starts. The armature current is increasing with the increase in voltage. Yeah, rotation starts. See, and the tachogenerator voltage this much. Now the voltage will be changed to to some extent, so that the armature current has also been changed and the tachogenerator voltage is also changing. So we'll first go on increasing, then we will start decreasing. So increasing. Now we are decreasing. Anyway, see, the experimental data for increasing, starting from IS 0.5, 0.7, 0.9, 1.1, that is armature current, for the variation of input voltage like this. We increased up to 1.58 so that the current reached 1.5, and the speed also changed like this. Similarly, after attaining this amount of armature current, we started reducing the armature voltage so that it can go down and motor finally stop. The motor stops after reduction of the voltage further. We didn't take that reading from the stoppage of the motor. Now, if I plot this increasing and then decreasing values in the same graph paper, see, increasing then decreasing. So there is an obvious presence of hysteresis. The presence of hysteresis is quite obvious. So the motor is not a perfect one; it has hysteresis. So if you work with this servo motor, you will get good amount of steady state error. We intentionally took this type of motor to show you the effect of it, the presence of hysteresis and how to determine. Ideally, it should be 0. There should be no hysteresis. That rising and falling should be same graph, and it should be straight line. Now the time response of a DC servo system is almost like a second order system. And in system theory, you have seen it that theoretical transfer function is of second order one. But you neglected, for simplicity, you neglected the electrical time constant. So up to hysteresis determination, is it clear to you? Shall I proceed further?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I will take another 10 minutes. to complete it. Okay, now the third part of the experiment is apply a step input. Apply one step input to it and record the response, and from that response, try to find out the transfer function. We'll do that, but we at present we do not have this strip chart recorder that is needed to perform that experiment. So I will show you a past record when the strip chart recorder was operational. We took some reading, and we share the diagram with you so that the concept becomes clear. We cannot show the video of it because it's not performed nowadays. The response will be like this in ideal case, but what happens? We have neglected the electrical time constant because of its small value. So the approximated transfer function is very similar to a first order system. But if you reduce the mechanical damping, then what will happen? The first order response may become under damped, and it may exhibit like this. But servo system, most of the cases, we don't want the servo system to oscillate. We don't want this oscillation in the servo motor output characteristics. So most of the time we try to make the system, the servo system, either critically damped or a little bit over damped. For example, in industrial robot, when you use DC servo motors, you keep the damping to such a value that it is little bit over damped, so that the oscillations can be avoided. Oscillations of the end effector of the robot arm can be avoided. It makes the system little bit sluggish, slow, but it eliminates the danger of oscillation, because any oscillatory output is dangerous in servo system. So this is the ideal case, but actually what happens, I'll show you. So what is done during this experiment? One step input is applied, and the output response is noted in a strip chart recorder. And this is the diagram, photo of a strip chart recorder. We took this record a few years back when the strip chart recorder was operational. These notches are due to noise. So if you eliminate this noise and think about the response, this is the response without noise, then you'll see that it's similar to the response of a first order system, and that corroborates with our assumption that the electrical time constant is very small, so the system is approximately first order one. The response is also showing a first order type or first order like response. Now, what is the usefulness of this strip chart recording? It is very useful. How can I say that? It will be used for the determination of transfer function. You know that for a first order system, if you can determine the time constant, then and the gain of the system, we can determine the transfer function. Here, if you take, this is as a zero line, this much is the offset, so this is the zero line, horizontal line, and from here, this is say the steady state value, and you know the applied input was in this case say 6 volt, but 6 volt is not there. 1.5 volt we used to apply for this motor. If you apply 1.5 volt and your output is, in this case the voltage was applied 6 volt, but the output we got somewhere 3.5 volt. So gain is a fractional gain. Okay, so something like 3.5 by 6. So this much is the gain of the system. And from here, if you take, this is at the starting point or 0, and because this time wise also there is offset. So this is, we consider this as 0, and from the time scale we can calculate how much we are going to the right side. So with this rectification, I can determine the time constant. How? See, this is the final value and this is the initial value. So how much time is taken to reach at the 63.7% of this full scale value? That has to be determined. So I take this point as the starting, I know the final value, and I calculate 63.7% of this final value, and I mark it over here, and extend the line. Where it cuts, I drop a vertical line to the time axis, and I record the time from here to here. So that time is the time constant. So I can determine the time constant. I can determine the gain of the system of the DC motor from this time response. So I can write down the transfer function. So in the last semester, you determined the or you performed one experiment for identification of linear system using frequency response test. This is another way to determine the transfer function or system model, or identify a system from time response. Okay? So this is actually one single experiment, but it clarifies both the concept of identification in time domain as well as the characteristics of DC servo system along with its speed torque characteristic and determination of nonlinearity. So 3 experiments are clubbed together in this simple experiment. So I think this much is enough for this experiment study of DC servo motor characteristics. I have shared many links of details of DC servo system or servo system in general. So please go through them along with the servo system related content of the book Nagraj Gopal. So I think this will help you. This description given in this PPT as well as the references that I have mentioned, along with whatever I taught during last 1 hour, will help you understand the basic objective of study of DC servo motor characteristics. If you do not know the basics of DC servo motor, it will be difficult for you to grasp the idea of 2 more experiments that will be performed on the same setup. One is speed control servo and position control servo in the final year. So take some interest or be serious to understand the servo motor characteristics. In industry, you will find a lot of application of servo motor or servo systems. So if you have any doubt, you can ask me now, or you can send WhatsApp. You can send your questions or query in my WhatsApp number. That is also possible. I'll share the PDF of the PPT after I exit from the class. Any doubt?
No, sir.
No doubt. Sorry.
No, sir.
Okay. So if you have any, if some doubt occurs later on, you can send it. Say you can write down to my WhatsApp. Then I will stop sharing and exit.